So we're seeing a lot within the media landscape, and when we're speaking to clients, that things are changing at the moment. I think probably one of the big ones is we are seeing a lot of change to how we do measure media. I think it'd be actually quite nice to tell people, what is our approach?
Yeah, well, you're right, there's a lot going on. As we see it, there's a sort of a trio of attribution and contribution work that can be done, and the outputs of all of those are then insights really that can be used in a strategy. So the first of that trio is enriching your multi-touch attribution with privacy-safe, privacy-compliant information. So that can come from a few different sources, particularly using the consent management platform properly. So certainly something that people have got away with for a long time, but 2024 is going to ensure that that's used properly. Enriching data, perhaps through server-side tagging or offline imports, and using the enhanced match as well, where we can fill some of those attribution gaps between the standard like click-based attribution we're all used to, but for users or perhaps transactions where they're not tracked in that same way, later closing that conversion loop. So it makes our multi-touch sort of data-driven attribution a lot more effective and efficient. That's the first part, and that's certainly like day-to-day platform activation teams are going to benefit from that quite a lot. The second piece of that puzzle really is incrementality testing. And what we do there is we measure the sort of causal lift that a piece of activity does. And that allows us to sort of circumnavigate that digital attribution where perhaps you see 2 or 3 platforms each getting a bit of credit for that sale. And we can sort of pull back the cover on that really and understand what cause and effect sort of has taken place there, so we can credit the channels more appropriately. The third piece there in that puzzle is media mix modeling. So with media mix modeling, we can take into account all of the inputs and all of the outputs, which is usually revenue, and use statistical modeling to tell the story of what happens in between. The benefit there is that we essentially don't use any digital attribution whatsoever, and we let the data with some inputs and some modelling choices along the way sort of tell that story, and it allows us to capture like the long-term effects of different types of advertising. We can consider different contextual externalities as well, so implications of pricing, competitor activity, even holidays in that country that the modelling is taking place in. Together, this gives us, I guess, a really well-rounded view, a set of insights that can be used tactically on a daily basis. So we can still use multi-touch attribution for comparing the efficiency of one campaign versus another. They exist in the same sort of sphere. But then we can also use incrementality testing to reinforce our modelling process. And off the back of our modelling process, we can then use the outputs and the uncertainties that produces for us to then create new incrementality tests as well, so that it becomes like a self-reinforcing, constantly improving model that explains what has happened. And I think that's really key as well, just to mention, is this provides such an array of insight, but it does look backwards.
So how do we make this a bit more tangible for people?
Each of those pieces of activity are going to give us a different level of insight. Some of those are going to carry forward into other pieces of activity. Some of the outputs from all of this work is that we can more accurately monitor and apply bids basically to lifetime value of customers. That's really important on the digital attribution side of things, because we want to find more customers who look like those who have a lifetime value, a higher purchase rate. The incrementality tests are going to be able to prove or disprove hypotheses we may have around activating on new channels, activating different campaigns, or trialing different levels of spend, be that right down to zero or maybe increasing spend on a particular activity. We'll be able to sort of understand some of the saturation that we're getting from some of those channels and be able to look at that point estimate of the ROAS of that activity. And the outputs from the media mix modelling, I think, are perhaps some of the most exciting. Certainly some mid-market companies may not have discovered this until perhaps in the last 12 months or so. Some of those key outputs, which I think are really interesting for teams, would relate to deduplicating ROAS or being able to sort of look at different media mixes. So I guess that's covered quite a few of the outputs, the insights that this sort of work can generate. But in terms of how you're seeing this within activation teams and speaking with clients, how are some of these insights helping you?
We're seeing a lot of clients are calling out for more understanding of where their conversion is coming from. We're finding that people care a lot more about both their brand and performance activity of being able to tie it back to a single point of truth, or one that is less ambiguous in nature. We're finding that clients do want a lot of deduped data. They want to actually understand where their conversion really does come from, which is why we're finding when we are implementing things like MMM, we are seeing clients grow, and we're seeing a lot of clients have a better understanding of their media mix. For us, it's really, really important. We're able to budget and allocate a budget a lot more effectively. Actually seeing where this comes from in channels and seeing like what channels are, giving, I suppose, their contribution. Not just great for us, but great for clients themselves and the brands being able to actually measure and put their budget where they can actually grow. I think lastly, probably one that we get asked quite a lot is like, why can't we just use an out-the-box solution? And ultimately you can, but it wouldn't be something we would recommend. A lot of these out-the-box solutions like use AI to sort of fill in blanks, and ultimately that doesn't give us much more meaningful data or insight into like how we should pocket or look at budgets. It's essentially creating a false artificial variant that we don't really want to follow, and using our own MMMs allows us to manipulate that data, but also be able to give client output in a lot better and easier to read way. And it also just helps us like work close with clients with the story that we tell, help them educate internal stakeholders.
That's how, I think you touched on really there why we do bespoke media mix models. It's because the transparent nature of that is that you can't hide from the data. Any prior information that's used to actually shape them comes from tests, and fundamentally those inputs and the outputs are then entirely transparent. So a black box solution may or may not give the story, but through a bespoke solution we can take into account all of the externalities that might be affecting that business that other sort of solutions may not be like nuanced enough to handle. And we do it in that transparent way as well. So I think it really helps, as you say, with the storytelling as well. Ultimately, these things are just models. They're a good explanation of what's happened or might have happened, but they need to be taken as insight, and the strategy needs to be built around them as well.